I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. Great to be back here with you today to talk about ADHD at school. I want to talk about what your child's teacher needs to know. This has come from working with a number of kids lately where they already have a diagnosis of ADHD, and I've been doing assessments to help understand whether there are other things impacting their development or whether they are having difficulty at school and learning. And what I found commonly is that first of all, the only constant in life is change. Isn't that what people say? And so what I've noticed is with schools, the only constant thing is that it varies from school to school, how the school and teachers are approaching ADHD. But often I feel like for parents, what they're saying is that it's really difficult to know what to suggest for the school to do, because parents want to make sure that their child is supported at school, but without being a teacher, and sometimes without being somebody who works in this space with ADHD, it's really difficult for them to know what to suggest. So they want to do the best for their child, but they're not quite sure how. And so as a result, I've been writing lots and lots of tip sheets for schools about how to support kids with ADHD, and sometimes primary school, sometimes high school as well, because the strategy is different and the expectations are different in high school versus primary school. So I wanted to talk you through some of these things today, and then I will link in the show notes a spot where you can download the fact sheets that I've been creating, and you can share those with your teachers at school as well. But actually, right as I'm speaking, I'm writing myself a note to do that so that I don't forget. Often I will say something in a podcast and then I forget I've said it and it doesn't happen, but I will write a reminder. So let me talk you through some of the things that I think your teacher needs to know. It's a big topic, and it's because honestly, school can be tough for kids with ADHD. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they're not capable. It's often because they need extra support for doing things in the moment, which is executive functioning. And it's often because classrooms aren't built with all brains in mind. They're built with the most common brain in mind. And so as a parent, I mentioned you've probably found yourself stuck between wanting to advocate for your child and not knowing what to say. But sometimes parents too say they don't want to be that parent. They don't know how to navigate the line between advocating for support and then overstepping and being annoying and having that have a negative reaction for your child. So I want to arm you with some knowledge that can help so that you can have confidence, but also perhaps a little compassion for teachers and see it from their perspective as well, so that you know what your child's teacher needs to understand, but also how you can be a collaborative partner with your teacher, with your child's teacher, to help your child the best. So the first part I put in my sheets, I guess, and what I want to cover today is why school is harder than it looks for an ADHDer. So let's take a walk in your child's shoes for a minute. They are sitting at a desk. They're expected to focus on not just one, but multi-step instructions. They, at the same time, are expected to tune out distractions. Then they're expected to remember what to do, to get started independently, and then stick with it until it's done. And all of that is without movement breaks or other breaks, and sometimes without a lot of help. This is what the typical kids kind of expected to do. Well, I should say not typical, but like all children. So this is a huge ask for a child with ADHD whose brain struggles with a few key things. The first thing kids with ADHD struggle with is regulating attention. And so it's important to note here that it's not just paying attention, which we say a lot, it's actually regulating attention, which is more complex. So paying attention means to be tuned in to the information that you're being given. To regulate attention is what all those other bits we were talking about are. So, for example, it's being able to tune into what the teacher's saying while tuning out the distractions. So regulating attention means knowing what to focus on and what not to focus on. And that can be really challenging for ADHD brains. The second thing ADHD brains struggle with is working memory as well. And that's holding information in their mind long enough to be able to execute the task. And so in that example I gave before, it's about remembering the 3 or 4 instructions they're given long enough to actually be able to do them. Also, this makes me think about some research that's shown that for kids in prep, probably a good thing is about 1 instruction at a time. But some studies, and I don't know whether they're Australian or not, but have estimated that teachers give possibly 4 instructions at a time, or on average, maybe 2 or 3. So that's because it's really hard to adjust as an adult working with little kids to constantly adjust down to their level of what they can handle. It's really difficult. But so if your child's having difficulty with working out what to focus on and what to tune out, and they're having trouble remembering, you're starting to build a picture of why being at school is so hard for your ADHDers. Another thing that is common is difficulty with impulse control as well. This means for your child stopping themselves from blurting out answers, from fidgeting, or from getting up and moving over their desk, away from their desk. Sometimes it's trouble stopping the urge to start on a task until the instructions are finished. So all of these things are stuff that is required to be able to go through the motions of school. I wanted to talk a little bit too about movement or regulation of movement, and that's what hyperactivity is. It's difficulty with regulating the movement to be able to sit still when required. So lots of these things are harder for ADHD kids than for other kids. If it's harder for your kids to do it, it means that they're actually working harder than all the other kids in the classroom to be able to do this stuff. This is before any processing of the learning is happening. Just to be able to access the information that the teacher's giving them, they're working harder than everybody else. When you add on top of that any things that are not going well or extra challenges for your child, like being overwhelmed with sensory information, regulating emotions, fatigue, tiredness, sometimes from masking or that kind of thing, it's no wonder lots of these kids come home drained and frustrated and just melting down by the end of the day. So It's harder for kids with ADHD to be at school, and they're working harder just by being at school. There's a couple of common misunderstandings too that I think it's worth going through. Um, Lots of teachers want to help but might not understand fully what's going on. And so some of these myths too can play into how they support kids. The first one is this idea that kids can focus when they want to. And we all notice that with kids with ADHD, but maybe other kids as well. It's that they might find it easy to pay attention sometimes and harder at other times. So, for example, they might focus really well on Minecraft, but they can't focus well when it's handwriting. First of all, that's so common, but isn't it normal? Like I would be like that too. But attention isn't about attention span or focus. It's about regulation. And so it's for ADHD brain, it is so much harder to pay attention when things are boring because their brains just aren't wired that way. So when you see or when teachers see a difference in focus, it's not because your kid either wants to or doesn't want to pay attention that they're turning it on or turning it off intentionally. It's just because things that are interesting and engaging are easier to spend or to focus on, and things that are hard and difficult are not easy to focus on. So it will tell you a lot about your child based by knowing what they can focus on and what they can't, but don't see it as a willful choice that the child is making. The second thing is that they are being disruptive. This is not intentional most of the time. Usually, kids are disruptive because they're dysregulated, which means they're having trouble managing their emotions or their attention or their movement. It can also be boredom. Again, I'd say this, so many kids, ADHD brains hate to be bored, and they say, yes, we do. It's so hard. And the other thing is could be need for movement as well. So if the child's being disruptive, don't assume that it's intentional. Assume that it's trying to communicate a difficulty of some kind. The third thing is they're not trying hard enough. And I can't think how many people tell me when they look at their report cards and it says that, so and so had the ability, if only they could apply themselves. It's so easy for us to judge behavior based on what we see that kids are, intentionally either paying attention or not, they're being disruptive or they're not trying hard enough. As I mentioned before, ADHD kids are trying harder than everybody else just to be in the classroom. They often try really hard. It's not a motivation problem. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. But most of the time, it's a skills difficulty and a support problem that kids don't have the skills yet to manage our expectations. And they don't have enough support or the right support to be able to do things in the class that helps them regulate. So an example for that one might be that some kids need movement in order to be able to concentrate. So being able to walk up and down the back of the classroom while they're listening, for example, can mean that they are getting enough movement that they can focus their mind on what the teacher is saying. If you don't allow kids to do that, then you're just, like some schools do that, that's their choice. But the reality is then you're going to have a dysregulated kid. You're going to have a kid who is fidgeting and having trouble in their seat because they need movement. So I think it's really not okay then to blame the child for not trying hard enough. Having said that, there are lots of things that can help. And these are some ideas that can be practical for teachers to use in class. And there are a lot more in the worksheets that I will, or not worksheets, fact sheets for teachers as well. There's lots of suggestions and strategies. Your teacher's not going to be able to put all of them in place, but there are a lot there so that there's a toolbox of options for them to choose from. I'm going to talk today about just the key ideas, though, and then how your teachers implement this can be a discussion that you have with them about what you think will work. What I think we could sum it up by saying what your kids with ADHD really need at school is scaffolding. And so this is because regulating is the core difficulty in ADHD. And so that means regulating emotions. Sorry, I was going to start with attention. Obviously, that's the one we all know about. Regulating attention. So knowing what to focus on, what to pay attention to, and what to filter out. But it's also other things like regulating movement, regulating emotions, all of that kind of stuff. And so the more you can do to support a child with regulating themselves, the better they're going to be able to do. And that support is what we call scaffolding. There's probably, I'm sure people with a better understanding of building who would give you a really much better explanation of scaffolding. But when I think about scaffolding in a building context, it's kind of what's people use to be able to get up to higher parts of the buildings. It supports them, they can stand on it, and they can work up at that level. And ADHD supports is the same kind of thing. It's extra support, whether that's like breaking things down into small steps or presenting things in a clearer step-by-step way. And it's designed to be the extra support that kids can kind of rely on so that they can just focus on doing the work, the academic content at a certain level. So here's a few key strategies of scaffolding that teachers can try. The first one is to chunk instructions. This can be verbal instructions or also any activity your child's given. Break things down into smaller steps. We talked before about how working memory is a challenge with ADHD brains. And also, in addition to that, the more instructions you give, your child then has to work out which ones to focus on and which ones to forget. So it's really difficult. If teachers can break it down into smaller steps, that makes the tasks so much more manageable for ADHDers. An example of this that I use a lot in my therapy sessions with kids is rather than give them 3 things at once to do, I might, for example, say, first I want you to do this part. Tell me when you're done. So then rather than tell them the 3 things we're going to do, they do the first part and they tell me, and then I'll give them another instruction or we'll unpack it together. So it's just keeping things a lot more simple and easier to manage. The second thing is to use visual aids and visual supports. This is something that I encourage you to use at home as well, and I put it in almost every report I write when kids have ADHD. This is, again, another strategy that helps reduce that how hard the brain is having to work, because kids don't have to rely on memory anymore. And so think about presenting as much of the information and instructions as possible in a picture format. This might mean that your child's, and these things that the teacher can use for the whole class. But it's so that, for example, what the kids are going to do that day is either written on the board or with pictures for younger kids so that they can follow through. It means also for each session, maybe there's information about the list of tasks that are going to be done. They can be pictures, they can be words. It depends what level and age your child is. You can also use them for each task as well, so that kids know the steps in a task and they can make sure and tick them off as they go along, that they're not forgetting any. Another great thing to use, which fits into this visual category, is timers as well. And this is because it's really hard for ADHDers to keep track of how much time has passed and how much time they have left. So if you can use even something as simple as a sand timer that will let them know if they've got 5 minutes to do the task, they can visually see how much time has passed and how much they still have. They're going to be able to manage the task a lot better. So we talked about breaking down instructions. We've talked about using visual supports. The next thing is to build in movement as well. I encourage teachers to do this as just a part of the routine, not to wait until kids seem to really need it. It's much better to prevent challenges than to have to deal with them when they happen. So building in a short breaks where maybe it's a stand and stretch break, or walking around the classroom, wriggle break, using fidgets, all of these things that can build in movement will help your child be able to regulate throughout the day. This is important to bring home to the teachers too, that sometimes it might look like your kid's coping okay, but then when they leave school, they're kind of falling apart. That's a really good sign, or clear sign, that they have needed a lot more support throughout the day. And so hopefully working on that as a team with your teacher can let them implement a lot of these changes, so that your child is still functioning well in the afternoon. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just how you can celebrate effort, or your teachers can celebrate effort. It's really important to not just focus on the outcomes, but the effort that your child's put into doing all of this academic stuff. It's encouragement that can build confidence and motivation. And also, kids can't really control their outcomes or their grades, but what they can control is their effort. So rewarding that and paying attention to the effort kids put in is really important. So then I just wanted to talk briefly about then how you can be partner with your child's teacher to try and work on this stuff. It can be tricky to talk to teachers, and you want to support them and not overwhelm, and guide them without overstepping. And so the couple of ideas I had is to firstly lead with collaboration. So talking about how I'd love to share with you what works well for my child, and I really value your insight too. So it's you're coming at it from a mutual place of trying to work together. Second one is stick to a few key points. Teachers are busy and there is a lot going on. And like I mentioned, my reports might have a lot of suggestions, but teachers will not be able to put in place a lot of things all at once. So if you share one or two strategies that really help, and then ask the teacher what they've noticed, and that's a really good way to approach it. You can also talk about them in big areas as well. So, for example, if we talk about building in a lot of movement, or keeping, breaking things down into smaller steps, teachers might be able to then think, okay, I've got that. I can run with that and put it in place in a few different ways, rather than you having to tell them how to do all of the parts. I think keeping some really key principles for them to keep in mind is more helpful. And the other thing too is offer some resources. It varies a lot how much knowledge teachers have, and sometimes newer teachers have a whole lot more strategies about how to manage this stuff, or sometimes they don't have as much, and without the experience, they can be feeling a bit lost. So point them towards some short, accessible information. You can use the tip sheets that I have attached or included in the show notes here. And, there's other information or things for teachers as well that if you're aware of, you can point them in the direction of. I do talk a little bit about how to be an advocate for your child in both the ADHD programs, so supporting your primary schooler and then ADHD teenager as well. For the teenager in that program, it's more about helping them to advocate for their own needs, because that is part of being a teenager, is becoming more independent. But there are some resources and guidelines in there too about how you can have these conversations with your kid and then with the teacher. So in summary, I think the thing to really remember is that your kids are doing their best most of the time, and so are their teachers as well. And so if we could share information with kindness and empathy for the teacher's point of view, but also trying to be really generous and giving our kids the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time, we can help shift the system to one where each child is seen as an individual, and then the supports they're given are ones that will help with their particular needs so that they can access support at school. Just got distracted. I think I hear my kids at home walking around outside. So I didn't mean to say that support at school. What I meant was, so they can get the individual support that they need and to be able to access all of the learning and the curriculum kind of content. I think that's what we all send our kids to school for. And so if you and the teachers can help your child with that, then that's a win-win for everybody. So let me know how you've gone if you have shared, if you do share any of this information and the tip sheets with teachers from your school. Always interested to hear if they have feedback about what fits and what doesn't fit, because we've got to get it to be the right fit. Otherwise, it won't be used and your kid doesn't get the support. So share away with anybody that you know. Happy for it to be out there so that kids can get the help they need. And I'll leave it there, and I will join you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.